Welcome learners. Imagine you are at the traffic signal and waiting for the red light to turn green. But the traffic signal has a malfunctioning and it just shows red. So the frustrated user now is wondering, should he elope the entire signal and run away in order to reach to the destination? Well, kind of a similar scenario we have in our Flutter app, wherein we have the design ready. We have the hours, minutes, seconds components to be ready, but we haven't kicked the entire timer. Well, in this session, I'm going to show to you how not to be stuck into your traffic signal and actually get your car to be moving. Tune in into the session in order to understand how to get it there. Let's begin our session wherein we want to fix this hours. So what I'll do is now in my timer container, create a string as timer label. What do I mean by label? Well, hours, minutes and seconds is something that I would want to have as a label on my container, and then I am going to create something called as a constructor. A constructor is going to ensure that this variable is initialized while I'm using this particular class. For example, did you notice I just made this timer label and that this function is exactly having the same as my class. So what will happen? The moment I start using it in my timer screen, it's going to ask timer label as hours, minutes, and seconds. Next, this hard coding for hours, which is kind of responsible for displaying it all the places, I'm going to replace with timer label. And like now in my screen, the same timer container has hours, minutes and seconds. So don't you think this is a way much more optimized code wherein you are able to demonstrate the same container and use it thrice. So considering the same example, I'm going to create one more variable as timer value, required timer value, and this time the culprit of this 00 I'm going to remove and change it to timer value. Next, in my time screen, I'll put this as 01 hour, 23 minutes and 47 seconds. Upon hot reload, you even get both of them to be changed. So what did we do? We in fact have made the timer container to change dynamically based on what we are passing on the timer screen. Hence, this constructor variables are going to be very helpful throughout our app development process. That's because once we have an update here, let's say 49 from the constructor, we can try and change it on the widget. Hence, we are trying to now move towards a dynamic widget. Well, let me remove this. So let's say now when I hit the start timer, I would want the tick to go in this function or this fashion, 01, 02, so on and so forth. This shall continue up to 59 seconds. Now, over here, what do you notice? Is my container having a dynamic value or something which is even changing? Let me drag your attention from the very beginning. And I'll also hot restart my app. The moment you do hot restart, you'll be seeing the app to begin from the home screen. So here's my home screen. I'm going to click on this entire stopwatch app, and in fact, just notice the design. Is any part of the screen even changing? No. Hence the stateless widget. In fact, all the parts or all the widgets in the home screen are not changing. Hence a stateless widget. Now when I tap on it, I go into the timer screen. Now again, the values are hard-coded and hence it's a stateless widget. In fact, the timer container, when I tap on it, is a stateless widget. If all things in the app are stateless widget, how should we go about dynamically changing the container? So for the first time, what we are going to try and understand is the timer screen being a stateful widget. So I'll put over here the missing override and change this state. Again, mind you guys, if you have been following the code and trying to do by your own self as I am doing, then you are going to pay attention to the concept. Forget the fact that over here we are learning about stateful, state, timer screen state, etc. This eventually will come with practice. Now, inside the stateful widget, what I am going to do is return timer screen state. Why? Well, that's because now we are going to have one variable as seconds passed. This has been initialized to 0. Next, what I'll do is cut my row and keep this thing in a column. Now, my column is going to have this entire 3 widgets, hours, minutes and seconds, and followed by the start timer button. So the entire row and the button, one below the another, guys. So over here I'll have one more variety of button, filled button. By default, it's just going to have a color. That's it. There's nothing changing in the filled button otherwise. So I'll say that the text on the button is going to be start timer. Now when I do a hot reload, it has got the start timer button, and in fact there's a bit amount of color. On the main axis, I'll want it to be on the center. And what do we notice is, as we had imagined, the exact design to be getting replicated. Next, this seconds passed, I will increment on the button click and then do something called as a set state. First, see the difference that this seconds passed variable is actually making onto my app. Do you remember the timer value? Over here, let me convert this integer to string and then show to you how upon this plus plus we can actually make the timer seconds container to change. Well, that's because if one container starts to change, we know we are experts for copy paste. We can always try and copy paste and create the other containers. So here I am trying to click on the start timer button. Did you notice the seconds to move? In fact, let me click on it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. Now, do you want this entire user experience to be there into a timer app? Well, no. This we are trying to do in order to understand how this seconds last variable upon increment and upon set state is actually making the seconds container to work. What will happen if I don't do set state? If I now do a hot reload and try to click on this button 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. Did you notice nothing changed? Now when I do a set state 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it changes. So what do we understand? Simple. Set state is refreshing the UI. Well, that's a layman thing. You guys are developers. So you guys are going to understand that this build function, which basically is entirely displaying my timer screen, is getting recomposed, or let's say it's getting rebuilt, and then this container refreshes. The moment we stop set state, the rebuild is not initialized or not done, and hence the second pass remains unmoved. For example, if I just comment it out, unmoved. If I keep it, you'll basically notice the tick. That is what is a stateful widget, guys. If you want your app to dynamically change the values, then you'll be creating stateful widget. If you don't want the app to change even a single bit, you will be resorting to something called as a stateless widget. Hopefully the entire stateful widget now makes sense, as you have a new library into your mind as a stateful one. Going forward, I'm going to take this stateful widget and in fact make all the things complete into my timer app. What we are going to try and do is also enhance a bit amount of our mathematical skills. That's because our timer app is going to revolve around a calculation. Let's try doing all of that into our next session. Stay tuned and keep learning with open minds.